Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Most Important Conversations. Today, we're talking about relationships, and I'm here with Jenna, my co-host. How are you doing today, Jenna?
I'm good. We have a cool
Good.
topic.
I think we do. So we're going to talk today about relationships and the distinction. We're specifically talking about masculine, feminine energies, male, female energies in the context of relationships, and why it is so difficult in so many relationships for the man, the woman to be able to communicate, to be able to see the world through the same worldview, to be able to understand one another, and all of the ways that this has been institutionalized in our society, making it very difficult for women to be, seen as equals, even if they're not the same, and the whole proclivity for women to be like men. And what does that mean? And there's a whole bunch of different things that we're going to cover today, and it's a really powerful topic. It really is the source and the root, I think, of the challenges that most people in relationship, whether you're married, whether you're not married, whether you're just dating, whatever the dynamic is, this shows up over and over and over and over again. So let's just start talking from sort of the outset about this cultural. It's a cultural phenomenon
Mm-hmm.
of that where emotions and being emotional, being a human that has emotional proclivities,
Mm-hmm.
which let's say is mostly so women tend to be more right brain, men tend to be more left brain. Both men and women have both left and right brain stuff going on, but it's just sort
Yeah.
of where they live or prefer to live. And yet, because men have largely determined the rules of engagement in the world, what's considered normal, what's considered abnormal, and has basically been classic egocentrism, have defined everything that's normal from the masculine worldview, which is more of a left brain, logical, rational worldview.
Yeah.
And this has caused all kinds of problems for society, and right down to our individual relationships, all the way up to how we even structure our world and how we understand our world. So lots to talk about there, but I'm going to pause and let you kind of jump in here on what stands out for you around this, and then we'll just see where the conversation takes us.
Yeah. So, I work with people on their relationships a lot. And when Chad and I were talking earlier, it's like, how do men and women, or you can insert any way you identify sexually into this conversation because there's always going to be a polarity. So the issues that prevent people from having thriving, awesome relationships. And then we're like, okay, well, from a systemic perspective, we got this. So we're going to talk to the systemic issue of women losing their connection to their feminine self because they're trying to fit into a society that isn't really who they are. And that's just left brain dominance. I call it mind dominance in the resourcing method. And to give themselves permission back to trust their emotions versus emotional reactions, which is a thought that you're reacting
Mm-hmm.
to emotionally, that's not the part that has intelligence. But to
Mm-hmm.
actually tune into those rhythms and to communicate from there is going to create more harmony in relationships. But there's a lot of things broken and missing that we can put the pieces back together for people on communication, on understanding differences, on staying curious, not trying to be right, not trying to lock into that
Mm-hmm.
logic. Well, that doesn't make sense to me, therefore you're wrong. Like, we're not going
Right.
to do that. Like, that's
Right.
just not going to create good relationships
Yeah.
anywhere,
Yeah.
not even in the sandbox. It's like,
Yeah.
it's not good. And then to move into like, how do we create harmony? How do we relate to one another? Not even as men and women, just we're all different. We all have
Mm-hmm.
these different ways of seeing the world. And like, how can you be yourself, know yourself, stay here, but then relate to others is the extension of what we're going to be talking about as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's great. The first thing I want to kind of just lay as a bit of a framework, and then we can talk about all the different ways that this shows up.
Mhm.
So we'll do this as part of sort of our little intro, and then in the second segment we can really deep dive into where this all goes. So,
Mhm.
um, but I want to talk about paradigms, and I want to talk about which is another way of saying worldviews, because worldviews or paradigms basically determine and dictate our entire experience of
Mhm.
our life, It determines the way that we interpret things, we
Mhm.
understand things, the way we evaluate things,
Mhm.
or judge them. And for women, it's been a challenging exercise to try to thrive in a worldview or paradigm that is dogmatically masculine and left brain,
Mhm.
effectively. And so, what am I talking about? So, in our culture in the West, so I'm only talking about the West. I'm not talking about countries like India, China, Southeast Asia, so the East. But in the West, which little quick history lesson here. In
Mhm.
the West, we learned how to interpret our experience, what we call reality. It goes back thousands of years to ancient Greece, where logic and reason became the way to interpret this sensory data that we call life experience. And so logic and reason is simply an if this then type of logical sequence. It's very linear. It's if this is true, then this also must be true,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? If this, then that. And this is so embedded, so indoctrinated in our culture, you don't even probably realize that it conditions how you interpret your life,
Yeah.
including how you interpret the experience of your relationships, how you interpret the experience of yourself relative to other people. If you're a woman or
Mhm.
you have a more feminine system, you have this challenge. And the challenge that you have is the naturalness or innateness of the way that a woman's mind will work. It tends to be more right brained, proclivity, more right brain. It's not absolute, but tends to lean more right brain. And men's tend to lean more left brain. I think of left like L logic. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the way that I remember it. So, men, logic as a system of interpreting reality worked out really well for men. I mean, because they basically were just saying, this makes sense to me. This is the way everyone should do it. And there was no consideration going back thousands of years to, gee, I wonder if women interpret reality, experience reality different than men do. And
Mhm.
so, for thousands of years, we have basically doubled down multiple times on logic. We even say, sort of as a pejorative with someone, well, that's not logical. Like
Mhm.
to basically say that's stupid or
Mhm.
that's ridiculous or that's
Yeah.
right. So logic is the requirement that we must meet. Things must be rational or we discard them absolutely. And yet, just for all the men who might be watching, every man, and I can speak for myself from this perspective as well, has had the experience of laying out a perfectly curated, logical plan for this, then this, if that, then this, and away we go, right? So it's like in investor meetings, in the tech space and stuff, I'll always sit down with investors and they'll say, tell me your 3-year plan. Tell me your 5-year plan. How much money are you going to make? What's my return going to be? Right. So what they're looking for is this logical, if this, then that sequence.
Yeah.
And when I started to do this work around emotional sobriety, which is one of the things that we teach in the Jungle and the Gardener relationship program, and I started to really lean into understanding emotional energetics and dynamics and these sorts of things, I started to realize how ridiculous this was. That just because it reminds me of, I don't know if you watch The Mandalorian on Disney, the Star Wars thing.
I did
Did you
not,
ever
but
see
I
that?
just was to speak of illogical things. I live with synchronicity all the time. I was listening to cinematic themes and the Mandalorian theme came up and that was just 3 hours ago. So there's that.
Well, that's weird. Well,
Explain
there's this.
that.
Okay, well,
Logic
there's this.
people.
Yeah. No. So there's this character. I can't remember his name, but he's this sort of alien character. Whenever he says something, he'll say something, and then he'll say, "I have spoken," right, in this gruff term, as though it's like this declarative thing. I have spoken, therefore it shall be.
Uh-huh.
Right? It's
Uh-huh.
just this like powerful, logical, linear sequence
Yeah.
that's about to just happen because I have spoken. And so it's like, investors, it's like if I
Yeah.
say the 3 or 5 year, I have spoken, therefore your concerns are over. Give me your check. Everything's going to go fine. And then,
Yeah.
and then I think about people in 2019 who sat down with investors and they laid out their perfectly articulated logical plan. And
Yeah.
and the energy was, I have spoken. And
Uh-huh.
then Mother Nature, irrational Mother Nature says, hold my margarita.
Uh-huh.
Here's COVID. Your logical plans are gone,
Mhm.
right? So every man has had this experience of setting up this perfectly architected logical sequence of how something was supposed to go. And there have been times where you've probably felt this intuitive thing that's illogical, like this feeling comes up. Maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe it's not quite, but we ignore it because we are so conditioned to only do the logical thing.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work out. And how
Mhm.
many times have men said, I should have trusted my gut. I should have trusted my intuition. Well, I got news for you. And then we can kind of shift into, you know, how this plays out in relationships and everything. But I got news for you. Not everything in the world is going to be logical. In fact, most of it isn't. In fact, reality is pretty illogical,
Yeah.
right? When it comes down to it. And so women and those who are more right brain leaning have actually, I think, this incredible superpower to actually understand things without being able to logically and rationally articulate them,
Mhm.
right? But men struggle with this because we've been so
Yeah.
conditioned, and women are struggling. How do I fit in with my intuitive emotional system in a world that only recognizes and respects if I can articulate the logical sequence of how this is going to happen?
Yeah.
Okay,
Which is super
that's me.
annoying. So the
Yeah.
flaw is that men so the flaw is in typical relationships right now that are sexless, that are divorcing, is, and this is kind of dying off as like new generations are coming up because they're like, this shit doesn't work. Let's get married and let's have the kids and let's do the house. And, there's usually dual income a lot of the time. But the man is like, I am doing the work and I am doing the things. And if I do the things, then I'll get the things and I'm doing everything right. And therefore everything's right. Haha. Until the wife's like, fuck this shit. And then wants to divorce you, like kids,
Hmm.
maybe in their teen years. Like, so the trend I'm kind of seeing is like the teen years for kids, like where it just that's not what the wife wants. She wants a partner. She wants someone to show up. She wants someone to be present. But if you're left brain thinking, but I did everything right, so why they hire me? Because they're like, I did everything right. I don't know what else to do. Ugh.
Yeah, I
And
followed
all these
the if this.
emotions. Yes.
Yeah, I followed the if this then that logical sequence. Why are you mad?
And why did you leave me? And why do I now have
Yeah,
to pay this much a month?
yeah,
Like, and that goes poorly emotionally. And now you got to actually face the things that you've been shoving down and not learning.
yeah.
I'll learn how to feel feelings. So a lot of my work is like teaching people how to feel feelings
Hmm.
and process the past and process the identity that was if this, then that. And
Yeah,
go, "Okay, yeah, but what does life want for you? And who are
yeah,
you?
yeah,
And let's do
yeah,
that. Let's
yeah,
have you be you and relate to life from there. And then, oh, they feel better and their life goes better. Go figure. So, yeah, there's value all around, but that's the biggest flaw of that in terms of the typical sort of like heteronormative relationship style of marriage.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so we're going to get into a bunch of topics and we're going to talk all about emotional sobriety. We're going to take a quick break and we're going to be exploring and dancing inside of, because we really want everyone who's watching and listening to get that life isn't logical and rational. And in the context of your relationships, this is the seed or the germ of why relationships break down and why communication breaks down, is because we're dealing with different worldviews. And women just have a different worldview, and it's very difficult for women too because they're straddling this. I talk about being in the world but not of it. So women are in the world of logical, rational, masculine,
Mhm.
but they as an entity, as a being, aren't of it. Very difficult line to straddle. So we're going to chat about that and all the ways it affects your relationships
Mhm.
right after the break. Welcome back, everybody, to the most important conversation. So, Jenna, why don't you kick us off with a bit of a frame here for we just spent, a couple of minutes talking about the distinction between logic and rational ways of viewing the world and how that's the predominant culture in the West. It's not the culture, incidentally, in India and China and other places. They do a lot of things that are irrational
Mhm.
We in the West hear that as, oh, that's awful. No, not awful. They've done it for thousands of years, works just fine. And so why don't you kick us off with sort of the female irrational experience and how you see that showing up in the people that you work with, your
Right,
clients
the
and whatnot.
relationship problems. Well, the
Yeah.
one thing I wanna say back to your other point is that Western culture feels that they're more civilized and superior. So there's a
Hmm.
sense of also superiority with the logic. I just
Hmm.
wanted to give that voice of like, we're civilized with our little bleached things and our forks and our that it makes us elevated. And I think that's also just fake.
Yeah,
So
it is.
because you're betraying parts of your humanness, which is part animal.
Yeah.
So what I was thinking about was a specific instance with a client of mine who is a successful entrepreneur, woman, mother of two, great marriage for all, but nothing she wants to do makes sense to her husband that costs money, say a trip or a course that brings her joy. So her joy
Because joy is
is
irrational.
exactly, but
Yeah.
that doesn't match our plan,
Right.
And so her joy being shut down isn't just the emotions being shut down. She is being shut down.
Yeah.
She is being called invalid.
Yeah.
And that will not create a successful relationship. Like that is cancerous. So
Yeah. Yeah.
this devalued element of I don't understand you, therefore this isn't valuable
Hmm.
is really where we can lean in on where someone can see you don't understand your partner's need, therefore it's not valuable. That has to go. Like
Hmm.
there has to be more curiosity, more interest in how could we do that for you? How can we make
Yeah.
that happen? What do you need? And a lot of
Yeah.
the times, by the way, you say, "Oh, well, how can I make that happen? What do you need?" Sometimes just even saying it out loud, the person doesn't even need to go on the trip. Now, in this
Yeah.
case, this person 100% does. There's some experiences that her life, her soul, her aliveness is calling her into. Because
Hmm.
the other thing with the problem with the logic is the delusion that you're gonna stay alive, the delusion that you're not gonna get COVID, the delusion that you're not gonna get hit by a bus. Like,
Hmm.
it's so arrogant.
Hmm.
And then the feminine is somewhat tapped into, "I'm only gonna be Jenna once." Like, you can even go into the spiritual realm and be like, "Oh, I'm an infinite soul." But no, Jenna today isn't gonna exist again.
Yeah.
There is a sense of, like, emotional urgency that I think the value of emotion, like, when you watch a movie and you see the main character and they don't live their life fully and it guts
Hmm.
you, that's crazy valuable.
Hmm.
Because the next day might go differently for you and you might make different decisions, and that's what makes your relationship to life your life. So
Yeah.
that whole thing with relationship in an interdependent, healthy relationship between two people, you know, to support one another's aliveness is what we're gonna talk about here. It's like
Hmm.
how to
It's a good frame.
come together and enhance the aliveness, not be logical. Like, which life do you want to live? It's like the Einstein quote, like miracles or just getting by and not dying today.
Yeah.
Making, yay. Like,
Yeah. I was saying to someone the other day, so quick story of my own life. I did a very illogical thing last year.
Chad.
I, yeah, I know. It's awful. So I woke up it was a year ago, like last week. I woke up and I had a dream, and in
Means.
the yes, and in the dream, when I woke up, the message was go to Bali.
Aha.
I didn't know anybody there. Actually, I knew one person, but not well. And I had no reason to go there. I had no business interests. It
Mhm,
was completely illogical,
mhm,
completely irrational. As a matter of fact, when I told my parents that uh, Tara and I were going to go to Bali for 3 months, everyone's like, "Why?" Like, give me the logical
give me a
reason.
reason. Oh, and then I will accept this from you.
By the way, give me a reason, reasonable,
Yep.
rationality, right? So
Yep.
it's like you have to have reasons. The whole word reason comes from that same
Mhm.
body of thinking called logic and reason and rationality. So give me a reason. Help me understand the if I go to Bali, then this will happen.
Yep.
Logical sequence.
Yep.
I didn't
Yep.
have it.
Yeah.
So we went. And one of the best illogical, irrational decisions I've ever made in my life. And now we have all kinds of opportunities opening up there for business, and we've got a little community forming. And I stay in, as a matter of fact, this evening I've got my regular Bali calls with 2 different individuals. I had one this morning. There's a whole thriving thing
Hmm.
that I had no logical premonition or
You can't be a
clarity.
premonition from
Yeah.
logic, by the way.
Yeah.
But yes.
I had no logical visibility, I guess is a better
No,
word,
no,
right?
no,
Of what was going to happen here.
no.
And then many other things in my life that I had really logical, a clarity around, they didn't work out. It didn't work out at all. Right.
Mhm.
So this whole notion of being trapped, and if I think from a male perspective, every time if you're a guy and you go to a party, you go partying, there's nothing more illogical than partying. There's no point to partying. There's
Mhm.
no if this then. If I drink a 26 ounce of Jack Daniels, then the only logical thing I'll promise you is you're going to have a hangover.
Yeah,
So how's that working for you? So men
yeah.
do illogical, irrational things all the time. The thing is, we sort of
Normalize
compartmentalize
it.
them. Yeah,
Yeah,
where it's like, I can be irrational in this context, but
yeah,
over here, can't do it.
yeah.
Right. And
Golfing, fishing.
yeah,
It I'm
chasing
gonna
a
hit the
ball.
ball,
Yep.
but that's where I'm gonna be today. And
Yeah.
nothing's wrong with it. But I had the same thing with Peru, by the way. I got the
Mm,
message to go to Peru. I have no desires to go to Peru in 2012. Like just
mm,
0. 0. I don't want to get a selfie. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know about
yeah.
ayahuasca. All of the things people rush to Peru to do and it's on their bucket list. 0 fucks.
Yeah.
No caring. And then I
Yeah.
got another message and another message. So we start to listen to energy.
That's
It
right.
will
Yeah.
show you how to skip steps. And that's when you can
Yeah.
start to skip steps. And that's when life gets magical. And that's what we're going to start
Hmm.
talking more of because sexual energy can actually skip
Yeah.
steps.
Oh, yeah.
Magical, wonderful way. Because
Yeah.
you're like, starts with joy, probably ends with joy. Cool.
Yeah.
Because you're dealing with energy now. So when you listen to energy, which dream state allows you to receive, we're actually receivers. So we want to train our mind so that we can receive more than compute.
Yeah.
Then life can talk to us and
That's
say,
right.
there's a thing over here for you.
Yeah.
And that is, to me, that's the most intelligent thing.
Yeah. Well, I think, and where I was going with that story is I wanted to respond to the thing that you just brought up, this word that I'm so happy you brought it up because it is, I think, the linchpin word for men and women if you want to extricate yourself from the trap of logic and reason and the ways that just keeps you trapped and small and confined. And I'm not saying don't ever do logical things, but I'm saying that to deduce whether logic is required or I'm going to listen to my emotions, my gut, my intuition, these sorts of things, you want to tap into, is this experience, it could be in a relationship or just something you're doing on your own, is this experience going to bring aliveness to me?
Hmm.
The word aliveness, I think, is the linchpin word. If we're not experiencing aliveness with every decision we make, whether logical or illogical,
Hmm.
that should be the immediate, I'm not really sure I should be doing this because I don't feel alive by it. I feel dead by it. I feel joyless. I feel uninspired.
It should be the new metric of success.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Not,
Yeah.
we just talked about nutrition and just like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm getting calories in or whatever. I'm trusting this food label to tell me what I'm eating. Good luck with that. But
Yeah.
like, oh, does this bring aliveness to me? Did you eat food that loves you back? All that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like that's gonna never really steer you clear. And so getting back to relationships with that. So this woman is wanting to follow her aliveness, but it doesn't make sense to her partner.
Right.
Mm, this is not gonna go well. So at
And
some
the partner's trying to evaluate her
evaluate.
aliveness through a logical
Yeah.
lens. Yeah.
Yeah. But let's do this in August of this date and go here and plan it all out.
Yeah.
And it's like you miss the boat. Like there are times where you will miss the boat in life. And you could, but if
Mm.
you listen to energy, you will miss less boats that are for you.
Mm.
Right. So it's not about random boats. It's about the boats that's for you and your partner
Yeah.
in this case. And so we want to like tune in, which what emotional sobriety, you call it. I just call it emotional
Yeah.
intelligence, like feeling, feeling the guidance from it, not being reactive, tuning in, listening, you know, reducing the noise. So even
Hmm.
in an argument, so from a relationship standpoint, don't argue, don't yell words at each other.
Hmm.
Communicate. Like,
Right. Right.
do
Right.
you feel? And journaling is, I'm just going to keep saying that, is the magic tool, because humans need to go from here, the logic, bring it into the body, through the heart, down the hand, in the body, and bring your witness online. So journaling is a technology to help you get back to,
Yeah.
it's not just logic or energy. You're kind of having a town meeting with yourself all the time.
Hmm.
Like, this is saying this, but this is in the bank. Okay, da, 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 da. Okay, and now we make a decision with all
Yeah.
of the parts together. So it's not like
Right.
better than either or, because we talked about that with feminism. It's
Hmm.
not about better than, it's about all the pieces moving together in harmony and having the strengths be the strengths and the weaknesses be the weaknesses, but they're not strengths and weaknesses if they're unified.
Right.
Anyway, tangent, but it's
No.
relevant.
No. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
We'll talk.
one of the things I wanted to pick up on there in terms of how we can kind of think about this is, see, the leaning into logic that we have done as a culture is trying to solve the problem
Yeah,
of
problem.
the brain needing safety and security and predictability. So
Mhm,
logic is actually like a bedtime story.
mhm,
It's like the investors I was telling you about earlier who want to know how much money and success is going
mhm,
to be had in, your 3-year, your 5-year plan. And I literally started to say to people, so you want me to tell you a bedtime story?
mhm.
They don't like that, by the way. They get, that's, they get all, but let's look, and I
A
said,
little
but let's look at
patronizing.
this.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I do it intentionally because
I know.
I feel I want to rock these guys out of this
Yeah,
ridiculous. And I
a
say, look,
delusion. It's an
I
absolute
don't even
delusion.
know if I'm going to be alive tomorrow. I might
Uh-huh.
get hit by a bus.
Yeah,
So you expecting me to tell you this logical
for
bedtime
sure.
story
Mhm.
that you are banking on literally with your check.
Yeah.
And so then people will say, well, what else do you tell investors to bank on, right? And now we can relate this to relationships in a second because
Mhm,
it's the same mechanic. I say, the idea, the people involved, their background in terms of their ability to deliver on
mhm,
past things.
mhm,
That's what you're investing in, not the story we tell you,
mhm.
because that's irrelevant.
Well, that's Elizabeth Holmes. So,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
feminine energy gone bad.
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
she lost herself. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so in relationships, it's no different, right? I think that, so women getting into relationships with men, when you first meet them, there's
Mhm,
no logical story that's romancing you and wooing you into this, right? This is an energy exchange. There's
mhm.
nothing logical about it, right? Love or any kind of felt
Attraction.
feelings,
Mhm,
attraction or chemistry
mhm,
is illogical. There's nothing logical about it, nothing whatsoever. So you take that moment of aliveness
mhm,
and then we formalize it. Okay, we're in a relationship or we're going to get married or whatever the form of formalizing it is.
mhm.
And somehow in our brain, we think, okay, now that it's formalized, the logic has to come in now, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna
That's
logic this thing.
guaranteed.
Yeah,
No need to participate anymore.
yeah, yeah. We can put this on autopilot.
Yeah, it's done. We're married.
Yeah. And how destructive, because the thing that made the relationship feel alive was the irrational aliveness both individuals allowed themselves to be in.
Yeah, the unknown
Yeah.
continued to be unknown, and if people really tune in, the unknown is still there all the time.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
if the person's tendencies, like, that day is still a new day, but most people
Yeah.
again, don't communicate, "Oh, how was your day?" Actually, I had a new client, and he's super mind dominant, and we're at the beginning, and I have this other client finishing, and we're at the end, and I'm like, "Okay, amazing. We're gonna get you from here to there," where he's just so mind dominant. He's like, "Yeah, I felt really good, so I didn't do the exercises." Why? Because 1
Hmm.
plus 1 equals 2, so if I didn't feel badly, I didn't need the
Right.
exercises.
Right.
I'm
Right.
like,
Right. Yeah.
I am retraining your entire system back to aliveness, and then I had to
Yeah.
start from the beginning and explain to the mind, why we're doing this.
Yeah.
What we're doing is getting to the body so you can tune into this. So that I have my whole spiel. And then he's like, oh yeah, I do want that.
Mm.
He's like, so then he had to opt back in so that he'll do the thing, even though you don't need it. And
Did
so
he
again,
resubscribe?
did he? Well, yeah, he resubscribed. He's like, he's in now. I got a message of him like, did you do it? Did you do the thing? But like brushing your teeth,
Yeah.
like it was ingrained with your parents and the dentist and the really scary things in school where like this will happen to your teeth if you don't do this thing, to logic something that might not make sense on that day.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
you should do this thing.
Yeah.
And so, but then it's ingrained in us. So what we want is to have those systems support the aliveness. Like, here's why you should brush your teeth. It's going to support health and longevity. So from
Yeah.
a relationship perspective, we want to stay in that unknown, spontaneous, even though
Yeah.
there's so much you don't, but so many people say, how's your day? Fine. What did you do today? Oh, I went and got groceries. The questions are boring.
Yeah.
So change questions. Change
Yeah.
questions. What was exciting about your day? What were you grateful about today? What was surprising about today? What did you learn today? Good
Yeah.
questions.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right brain questions.
Yeah.
No.
What you're bringing up also reminds me of one of our other episodes where we were talking about how, and I still do firmly believe this, even though I'm not practicing it right now, but that I feel romantic relationships, whatever the form they're in,
Yep.
thrive better when the two people don't cohabitate together.
Right. Yeah. That was just recent. Yep.
And the reason I think it goes to what you were just saying, it disrupts this sort of natural tendency to build structure that creates predictability, and therefore I can go on autopilot, you know?
Proximity doesn't equal intimacy.
Right.
That's just popped in.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
That's a big flaw. But I was
Yeah.
here, but I'm home. No, but you're not,
Yeah.
the woman might say, or the man might say equally, you're here, but you're not here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think when you cohabitate, there is that sense that proximity equals intimacy. Therefore, I'm not going to ask how your morning was.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was there, but were you?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, what were they watching? What were they reading? What were they looking at? What bird were they looking at?
Yeah. Well, also, it's by not being in the same space all the time together, I think there's this natural aliveness and electricity that kind of
Mm-hmm.
pops up. There's an excitement of, oh, I'm going to see this person,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That you don't take them for granted,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it keeps you in a more creative space because you don't get into these sort of routinized ways of interacting,
Yeah. I
which
mean,
you
the
just
problem
do.
is this is not very logical in our societal structures, right? The kids, the routine, the jobs, the money situation. Very few people can actually afford to live. So when we talked about polyamory and the women choosing it, that the men are still living in the home together
Yeah.
because of the economic situation of like, when am I going to spend 2,000, 3,000 a month on a 1 to 2 bedroom apartment? So it isn't always that feasible, but highly recommended.
Well, so here's the
If it
thing,
is.
but let's be irrational for a second. Okay.
Great.
So it is completely not rational or feasible because we've set up a rational structure of a
System.
society
Yeah.
that requires cohabitation. Let's say
Mhm.
this. If I'm living in $1 million home and I'm really serious about aliveness, I might say, well, let's sell the $1 million home. You get a $500,000
Mhm.
condo. I'll get a
Mhm.
$500,000 condo, and we're going to do that.
Yes. I would totally think that would be a great idea. Again,
Yeah.
we're
Totally
we're, ta-
irrational.
we're taking people too far, but because
Totally
we're
irrational.
assuming they have $1 million house. I'm thinking about, it's cold out, but I turned the heat on anyway. So
Mhm.
take this off. But that would be great. And then we're talking about eventually the recreation centers, which I'm ecstatically excited about. I mean,
Yeah.
awesome. Like, I love community living, but I need my own space. I
Yeah.
need my own
Exactly.
place
Yeah.
to not
Well,
people with people.
well, hey, you might be joining us in Bali at some point because that's what's going on there now. So
I am probably going.
Yeah. Yeah.
After this winter, I'm like, blah, no, thank you.
Me too. Yeah.
I like pretty things and feeling good. So, and this is the thing that's feminine too, is to be like place value on time freedom, on the slow. This is all on Instagram, slow mornings, and anyway, this like
Mhm,
it
mhm.
looks nice on Instagram, but it's like it's real though, presence and community, and like not the toxic independence of doing everything alone. Because that's the other like cancer in relationships is so much doing.
Yeah.
Bleh. It's just
Yeah.
boring. Of course, you're not
Yeah.
having sex. Just like
Yeah.
another thing to fucking do,
Yeah. Got
really.
enough tasks on the list.
Yeah. Like, if we really boil it down, that has a lot to do with it. It is
Yeah.
no longer fun. It is no longer pleasure. And I think it takes a while. Like, I was really mad at my lover the other day. And then I was like, no sex for you. Like I'd already psychically decided this.
Oh,
So,
were you the sex Nazi? Like the soup Nazi?
me?
Like the soup
But
Nazi
it
in
was,
Seinfeld.
he had no
No sex for
idea.
you.
He had
No
no
sex for you.
idea, but I think he's tuned in enough to know. But then he gave me a massage. And then I completely changed gears because I was now in my body. I was out of my head. Whatever I was
Yeah.
angry about went away. But not enough people know how to tune in or know what their partner needs or whatever. So, like, all of it just disappeared. All
Mhm.
of the noise went away. And
Yeah.
that's the left brain, high beta brain waves, by the way, to take it further. So, left brain, we got beta, which is focus. High beta is where comparison, criticism,
Mhm.
overthinking, over planning all live, lack of trust, lack of
Mhm.
presence. And that's just, you're not going to have good sex there, just by the way. You
Yeah.
gotta bring it
Yeah.
down. And so, when we go to relating and we talk about relationships, we talk about sexual health, getting back into presence is so key. And then you'll be surprised what arises from the space you create that you
Mhm. Mhm.
didn't do. You
Yeah.
didn't do the things. You created the conditions for the aliveness to start to come out. And that's what
Yeah.
we're looking at. Like,
Yeah.
let emotions happen, to feel sensations, and so in Bali, like, if the feeling of sun, the smells, like valuing aliveness, that you will never
Mhm.
feel that again. You'll never
Yeah, I
feel
call it
alive.
organic living, or not organic, analog living. I call it analog living,
Right.
and it's just in reference to our overly digital immediate
Like
gratification.
virtual reality glasses, like, that might be really cool,
Yeah.
but some part of you will feel deeply dissatisfied because it's not a sensory experience. It's
Yeah.
not aliveness
Yeah.
interacting with you, which is what
Yeah.
humans want.
Yeah. Well, that's what makes us feel alive is aliveness, and we've logicked ourselves out of aliveness.
I just think it's
It
hilarious
looks.
we're having this conversation. Like,
Why
I
is
just
that?
don't think, no, just like, I think all of society is hilarious. Like, I'm just like, it's hilarious that I have to convince somebody to pay attention to what makes them feel alive
Them
to me.
feel alive. You would think that
Like,
would be sort
this
of the
is my point.
natural thing,
Yeah,
right?
like, you
Yeah.
should want to want this, but they're so conditioned by the other things and not
Well,
getting it wrong, getting it
there's
right.
no approval in aliveness, right? In our culture,
Nope,
there's no approval for
there's
aliveness.
no
There's
parade.
you're just crazy if you do that. It's
Mhm.
like my Bali trip. Why? Why are you doing that?
Well, Peru, I didn't even know
Because
why.
I
I
want
didn't
to.
even have a reason. I was like, I just need to go. At that point, I knew to trust spirit more than the real world because I'd
Mm,
had so many significant life experiences where it was beyond logic. And
mhm.
I love seeing people start to have these experiences where life will just, I call it snow globing. So life will usually snow globe you where like everything's everywhere and everything's falling apart, but it's good because
Yeah.
that shit wasn't for you anyway. And it's a benevolent pain, I call it, the benevolent pain that's like something's wrong to get your attention to wake you up before you die.
Yeah. And that leads me to one of the big distinctions, and I think you'll appreciate this. So So the reason I call the work that we do in the jungle and the gardener one of the modules emotional sobriety versus emotional intelligence. I always say emotional intelligence is part of emotional sobriety, but emotional sobriety is more expansive in its definition.
Mhm.
And one of the key distinctions is not chasing like an addiction an emotional state, even if that emotional state is happiness, not chasing
Yeah,
it. What does that
exactly.
mean? It means that, oh, this was so amazing. I'm so happy. I want to recreate this and do it over and over and over again. As soon as you have that thought, you move from right brain to left brain. You're now logicking the whole thing. You're trying to figure out, how did that happen? What were the ingredients? Can I replicate this?
Mhm.
And you're setting yourself up for enormous frustration. I mean, the Japanese call those kinds of moments wabi-sabi moments. They're moments that are completely irrational, completely illogical, and you just feel this sense of wonder and connectedness and aliveness to all things, and you can't replicate it. You cannot systematize this thing.
You can, though,
Hmm?
by not attaching to it.
Well, yeah, but there's no guarantee it'll be exactly the same.
No, it won't, but then
Yeah,
eventually that becomes exciting. So,
that's right. Yeah,
there's this backwards where you can't manufacture it and be like, "What were the conditions that made it happen, and how can I
recreate that.
control
Yeah,
and recreate
yeah,
that?" When you
yeah,
start to go, "Oh my god, life is talking to me, and I don't know what I'm gonna get, but I'm in."
yeah.
That starts to become, wabi-sabi.
Wabi sabi. Well,
Maybe it's
and
just
there's
fun
a
to say.
yeah, yeah. Well, it's fascinating. So there's a great book called The Uncontrollability of the World, and
Mhm,
it's written by a German philosopher. It's kind of a deep read, although it's short, but it's deep. But he summarizes wabi sabi up this way: it's those moments, those magical moments in life where you simultaneously realize you have no control over anything going on except you have control over your ability to respond to what's going on, but you
mhm.
don't control any of the stuff out there,
No.
right? It's like the first snowfall or a big
Mhm,
rainstorm
mhm,
or a sunset. You don't control the sunset. You don't control the rain. You don't control the snow. And it's this simultaneous feeling of my smallness and the meaninglessness of it all, the pointlessness of it all,
mm.
the
Nothing and everything.
uncontrollability of it all,
Mhm.
right? And yet I feel whole and complete at the same time. It's this strange situation.
Well, I think that's what's real. What's real is
Yeah.
the whole and the completeness, because 'cause I've done all of this spiritual development stuff, and then eventually a lot of the spiritual development stuff becomes its own ego thing, which is hilarious to navigate when I have some clients come to me and they're like, "Oh, I worked with this person who, like, knows the way." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And, one could say that about me too, but I'm like, "I know the way because I know I don't know the way, and I know I don't
Yeah,
know
well,
what to
exactly, right?
do,
It's yeah.
and humans work this way, and I know, we don't know how it's gonna go exactly, but there are some patterns and rhythms that the earth will give you, weather patterns, but the aliveness of life without predictability and how, because I was a complete rebel in my 20s. I was like, "Screw this.
Mm.
I don't want any structure, and I'm gonna take the time it was just a mess. It was a rebel. It wasn't a good thing. But then eventually I wanted some results, and
Wasn't a
so
bad thing either. It was just a thing.
it was just a thing. It wasn't serving my highest desires for sure. It was impeding it, at that
Mm.
point, and that's when I needed to make the shift. And then I got the download, which is, people say that, like, I got this download, I got this inspired idea that wasn't from a computational brain or
How irrational of you.
yeah, that said the river needs a river bank.
Yeah.
So the calendars and the things I was reeling against of the societal structures that I felt straitjacketed by and hamstrung by, and I was like, "Ah,
Mm.
well, do what I want," which is
Mm.
childlike. But then there's this, like, child enthusiasm with maturity and wisdom that starts to become really cool, and that
Mhm.
sober word is super great for that because I do use that as well, like, to be
Mhm.
sober with life and not need it to be a certain way for you to be okay.
Right.
That level of maturity comes from an emotional sobriety place,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, 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 for sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. And welcome back, everybody. We've got a couple of pointers for you that we'd like to wrap up this episode with. We're talking about the difference between experiencing your life, your relationships through a logical, rational, carefully curated and planned out way, versus tuning into that intuition, tuning into that emotion, feeling those things, and even experiencing the profound aliveness
Mhm,
that comes with doing the illogical thing. So we've
mhm,
got a couple of takeaways. And the first one, actually, I would invite everyone to try on tomorrow or whenever you feel you're ready, whenever you feel.
You should do
See,
it
it's not
tomorrow.
logical.
You should do it tomorrow,
Logically,
though.
logically, you should do it tomorrow. But what we want to suggest is the next time you get that feeling come up, like, gee, I really want to do this or try this or whatever the situation is. The next time you get that and your logical, rational wall comes up, it's like, oh, but that wouldn't be
'Cause it will.
logical, right? It will absolutely come up. We've been so
Yeah.
conditioned, and you talk yourself out of it. The advice is the advice you're invited to try on is do it anyway
Yeah.
and see how that feels in your body. Because what you need to start to do in order to break through the logical, rational container that we all have been conditioned to be in is start to have an experience of yourself outside of that container. It's a way of building capacity. It's a way of building self-trust around your emotions, around your intuition, around these things that we've been taught not to trust.
Yeah. And create space. I call it creating space. So
Yeah.
you got to shake up the linear to create space for space. And that magic of life, those synchronistic moments, those something that's going to come to you versus you having to work towards it comes in the spaces.
Yeah.
When you're driving, when you're in the shower, all of these great directors and writers, Stephen King and like they're not shy about saying, "Oh, when I was randomly on a walk, then it came to me," right? So you're
Hmm.
you're creating space. So by shaking up your routine, you're creating space for more to come in that isn't logical. That
Yeah.
right brain to come in. The other thing I say to people in the mind management element of things, because we want to manage the logical mind so that it becomes more of a receiver to all that right brain good stuff. And then in between, not need to think, but experience life, which is the other cool outcome, is the voices in my head are saying. So I'll say to someone, okay, I want you to just notice what the voices in your head are saying, not your thoughts, not
Hmm.
just the voices in my head are saying, this is stupid. Who cares? What a dumb podcast. What do they know?
Hmm.
The voices in my head are saying it's such a great exercise to start to see the narrations that aren't even you. Because you'll
Hmm.
start to
Hmm.
see voices that are like, that's not me.
There's my uncle. There's my
Right?
mother.
Like, you'll start to, like, don't try to fix it or, like, be like, "Why is that there?" Just like, "Oh, the voices in my head are saying," and so that's my takeaway, is that's my one of my favorite mind management tools is to start to be curious and notice without fixing. Don't try to fix it, just notice. That's enough. It's creating space. The
Hmm.
voices in my head are saying, and then someone be like, "But doesn't that mean I'm crazy?" I'm like, "Oh, we're all some version of
Hmm.
crazy," and the whole definition of crazy is that you don't know you're crazy. So we're dealing with the average public right now. So all of us have voices in our head. Even the people, there's some studies that people don't have inner monologues going on. I don't think I buy
Hmm.
that, honestly, because the more I work with people, they're like, "Oh, I don't have them." Yeah, they do. Like, once we
Yeah.
start getting underneath and noticing more,
Yeah.
they are thinking thoughts for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And here's the objective of these two exercises. It's not to suggest that logic or reason doesn't have its place, that the left brain is
Has a
completely
place.
useless, right?
No, it has a place.
It just doesn't need to dominate everything. So a perfect example is when I followed my gut, my intuition, my emotions that woke me up from a vision that said go to Bali. Okay. I then needed to still attend to some left brain logical stuff to make that happen. I needed to book an airplane. I needed to figure out how I was going to get from A to B. I needed to know what do I need for vaccinations because I'm going to another part of the world that has stuff that maybe I could get, like monkey encephalitis. Who knew that was a thing? Right.
No.
So, 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 there's these logic still plays a role, the left brain sort of linear, but ultimately where we all want to get to is the aliveness of our right brain's guidance system is guiding us. And then the left brain is handling, I think of my left brain
Your
as
assistant.
my assistant. It's
Yeah.
my executive assistant who
Mhm.
it's like right brain says, left brain, we're doing this. Left brain says, why? That's not logical. Right brain says, shut up and pack the bags. And
Yeah.
left brain goes and handles the logistics. And that's the balance that we want to achieve. What we have right now is this really left brain dominant world that is trying to control everything. And it's making us crazy because we
It's
can't.
strangling the life and joy out of
A
absolutely
life.
everything in the process.
Yeah.
Boo. I was gonna say, oh, it was good too. Duh. Okay. The left brain should serve the right brain. And then there's a whole
Yes,
metaphor
that's
for
right.
a relationship
Yep.
because masculine. So I remember learning this tidbit and then we'll go because we're over time, but I was atrocious to my boyfriend who I love so very much in my 20s because I didn't know all of this stuff, but I was like, "You need to love me this way, and I feel this way, and it's your fault." And I did everything wrong. And then I heard this quote, and it just gutted me. From Alison Armstrong, she's like, "There's nothing that hurts a man more than not being able to make his partner happy and not knowing how."
Mm,
And I was like, "Oh." That sucks because if he knew how, it would have brought him satisfaction and joy, and his purpose isn't to serve me, but there is this intrinsic joy and fulfillment in the serving of the partner that is a
mm,
thing. And so
mhm,
the left brain, just the same way, should serve the right brain.
mm,
And
mhm.
both are happy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. One thing to consider as we wrap as well, and kind of on that point, a lot of what the left brain is doing in its over controlling of everything, and it's a conditioned thing that we've allowed to happen in our society, is coming from a place of fear fundamentally. So it's the unknown is unpredictable. The unknown could mean my death. Ultimately, like if we take it all the way to the end, really we're trying to not die, right? And so the left brain's sort of,
Scanning.
management system
Yep.
is in perpetually trying to avoid our death. But the reality is people are dying every single day, metaphorically, to avoid their actual death. So, I mean, it's sad when you think of it
Not
from this
living.
perspective that most
Yeah.
people are living lives that are dead every single day. No
But they're
aliveness,
safe. They're
but they're
safe.
safe. Yeah. And to avoid the ultimate death. And I'm like, so the way I put it to some people, I said, I can either die once or I can die every day for the rest of my life. My choice,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm.
And that's how most people are living. They're living lives where they're literally dying every day.
And they've given away their power to believe these rules is like, this is just how it is.
Yeah.
I'm doing life right. And
Yeah.
so the
And I'm
purpose
getting
of life.
validated.
Oh, yeah, totally.
People are giving me the thumbs up. You did the logical thing, yet
Yep.
I'm dead inside.
Yep.
Yeah.
Something's broken.
Yeah. Okay, everybody. We'll probably pick this up in various forms on other episodes because it's a big topic and it's frankly at the source and essence of everything that Jenna and I talk about and do. It influences it at least. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, share this podcast with friends or family members or acquaintances or
Other
um,
humans that want
other
aliveness.
people that want aliveness. And we will see you on another episode of The Most Important Conversations. Until then, be safe.
That concludes this episode of The Most Important Conversations. This in-depth conversation could set you on the path to self-improvement, which is essential if you want to be an effective leader and take meaningful action in your life. If you enjoyed this episode and want more of these stimulating discussions, you can find them at tmicglobal.com. Remember, the world is at a crossroads right now. You can't afford to waste this opportunity to take charge of your life, build meaningful relationships with others, and co-create a brighter tomorrow. Thank you for listening. See you on the next one.